Welcome to the Cutting Time CNC Podcast, your go-to show for precision, efficiency, and innovation in CNC manufacturing. We're here to help you cut time in all of your CNC endeavors. Whether you're a CNC enthusiast, CAD/CAM aficionado, or into robotics, this podcast is for you. Join us as we explore cutting-edge perspectives on machining metal parts. Discover the perfect tools and streamline your production processes. Precision meets progress on the Cutting Time CNC Industry Podcast. And now, here's your hosts, Al Martins and Stephanie Bate.
Hey, Stephanie.
Hi, Al. How's it going?
It's going great. That never gets old. It might eventually, but not for a while. I really like that. So, Steph, what we got going on today?
We have a very exciting show. We have Steve from Port CNC from Wisconsin.
Wisconsin? Is that the land of the cheeseheads?
I think the happy cows are from California.
Well, they can't possibly be happy in California when it's just too warm over there. So I'm going to say the land of the happy cows is Wisconsin. We'll take that term. Californians aren't called cheeseheads, but I'm going to say Wisconsin's got the cows, and they got great cheese too. So absolutely,
you can't go wrong with cheese. And
no, you can't go wrong.
And enjoy the show. And yeah,
what's our show about again? Is it about dairy?
No. It's the CNC Communication, the ins and outs of DNC for CNC. And that's a tongue twister if I've ever heard one.
Absolutely. All right, Steph, we'll bring on Steve. I can't wait to talk to him.
Okay. Have a good show.
Thank you. Hey, Steve.
Hi, Al. Great to see you again.
Great to see you too. I was on a podcast, I don't know, a few days ago or last week, and somebody called me a goat. And, I want to share that compliment with you.
Oh, thanks.
Apparently a goat is a good thing.
Well, I heard you talking about cheese, and goat cheese is always good.
Yes, that's one of my favorite.
Yeah,
absolutely.
mine too.
Well, Steve, it's good to have you with us. DNC, to be clear, DNC for CNC has been around for a lot of years, certainly since paper tape. Paper tape kind of was the beginning of all this. But you've got a company and you've got a history. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about before we get too deep in this.
Sure. So we've been doing DNC or communications for probably about 35 years. Kind of like most places where we started it out of a necessity. I went to school for computers and electronics, and I was working at a shop as a manufacturing engineer, and I needed to have a DNC system and didn't really like what I saw. So I wrote my own, and that's kind of how we got started. I met another gentleman that later tried to sell me a DNC system, told him I had one. He told me his was better. And then he, told me about it, and I told him what mine did, and he started selling mine. So, and then we later partnered up and formed Port CNC, which, like I said, has been doing communications for 35 years now. So,
wow, that's quite the legacy, and it's not much different than the way Bill Gibbs started. Really, he wanted a better CAM system and something to work for machinists, and you wanted a better communication system because there were certainly some pretty rough things back in the early 90s and late 80s for sure.
Yep. And, bringing up Bill Gibbs, I remember he used to say that he wrote a CAM system designed for machinists, not for designers. That's kind of like us. We wrote a DNC package or a communications package designed for machinists with machinists in mind.
Yeah. And we've certainly had a lot of experience with it, and we still use your system up here, and people love it. So
that's great.
That's exciting. So, our general idea is we're going to try to get through 10 questions.
Okay.
So I don't know that we'll get through them all. We go get down a rabbit hole somewhere, but we'll try to get through them, and we try to do that all within an hour. So
Okay.
I'll do my best to keep the the parameters in place, and we'll have Stephanie, I'm sure, looking at me with strange eyes or kicking me on the side in the private chat.
So I'll try not to ramble on.
Brilliant.
Keep it on point.
All right. So question 1, what is DNC and how does it differ from traditional CNC communication methods?
Well, DNC typically refers to two things. The most common one is a distributed numerical control, which is basically a file management system, which just says, I'm going to hook up my machines, and so when I want to program, I get the right program. So it's a file management system. The other meaning of DNC is direct numerical control, and that's when you don't have enough memory in your machine, and you need to drip feed or spoon feed that program into the machine. So that way it fills up the buffer in the machine, stops when the machine is full, and will just keep going. Back in the past, most machines just had serial ports, unless you talk about really old machines like you had mentioned, tape. But we're going to start with more the computerized stuff. So when we had serial ports on machines, a lot of times it was very small amounts of memory, and so drip feeding was much more common. Nowadays, we tend to have a lot of machines that have bigger amounts of memory or hard drives that can fit larger programs, so it's not as commonly needed. But we have manufacturers like Fanuc, which is a very popular control, where even though they're more updated, they still don't have a lot of memory. So some people will drip feed with serial or with a PCMCI memory card. You can't drip feed with normal FTP, but you can get what they call their data server, where you FTP it to the data server and then you drip feed from the data server. So that's
Right.
main meanings of DNC.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as you say, it's not a sexy topic.
Yep.
I've sent out this invitation. So, well, yeah, it's not overly sexy, but, without it, it really makes a difficult time to run a shop.
Yes, it does.
It's like electricity. The topics on electricity aren't exactly interesting. But if you don't have it, those machines aren't going to run.
Yep.
So,
So many people use the sneaker net method, is what we like to call it,
Yeah.
where you're taking thumb drives or floppies or a laptop to a machine to load programs in and out, and is very inefficient. It takes quite a bit of time. I've even seen customers that say, our programs aren't that big, we just retype them each time.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But now you're losing control of that program. You may not type it in the same way. You have errors. So DNC is still very important in the industry. And if you have CNC machines, you really want to have a DNC system.
Yeah, and a reliable one, because those
Yes.
machines are millions of dollars, and if you can't get a program down to it,
Yep.
that's a problem.
Yeah, because there are systems that aren't reliable and they drop characters, and that can cause crashes. So reliability is very, very important.
Yeah, the difference between a minus and not is a problem.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that gives us the idea of what DNC for CNC. I mean, basically CNC communications. So yeah, makes it very clear, I think, hopefully. So question 2, can you explain the primary benefits of using DNC in a manufacturing environment?
I would say the main purpose is file management. File management meaning when you want to program at the machine, you want to make sure you have the right program. When we go back to the sneaker net method, some people will have programs on thumb drives, or I had a customer that had these little handheld units, and each person had one in their toolbox, and they were going for ISO certification. And when they were going through their certification, the person said, well, how do you know that's the latest program? He said, well, I keep it here in my toolbox. And she said, well, does everybody have access to that? No, everybody has their own. Well, then how do you know you have the right program? Well, everybody has their own version. So of course they failed, because ISO requires you to have control of your programs.
Yep.
And that's one of the main things that DNC is going to do, is give you the file management that says, when I call out this program, I'm getting the latest proven program for this machine. So with a good DNC system, you'll have it where when they send a file back, it will go into a separate holding area where an engineer or a programmer then is going to verify what changes were made to that program. Like in our system, it will do a file compare and it can email just the differences to the programmer or the engineer, the person that's verifying that this is the right program. See what the changes were. He might investigate, might see because it was a rev number, and they'll be able to, make sure that the latest program is now in their download file. So next time when they go to download, they're only getting that proven file. And eNet also allows you to do rev control, and any other good DNC system would hopefully do rev controls also to make sure you do have the latest, greatest program. So, and the other thing about a DNC, like we said before, is spoon feeding. Having a system that can spoon feed all your machines simultaneously with one computer efficiently is important if you need to have that type of data. We have some shops that the programs they run aren't very big, so they don't have to worry about it. But shops that have large programs definitely need to have a good system for DNC.
Yeah, and when you're saying spoon feeding, some people refer to that as drip feeding.
Yep.
In the old days, the buffers weren't very big on those controls. So in fact, if you weren't having a significant data rate, you'd have a situation where the machine was starving and the toolpath would just stagnate until it read the next line.
Yeah. And when it comes to DNC, one of the things you have to be careful, some people will just use a laptop and then they'll have a serial cable or a USB to serial cable that they're hooking up to a serial port on a machine. But one of the problems you run into is if you're communicating with an older machine, they have really small buffers. Yep. So you want to go into the FIFO settings for that COM port and turn down the buffer settings. Otherwise, you can have buffer overflows and lose characters, and it can be very problematic. That's why we recommend using hardware designed for DNC, which is what we do. Our hardware is all designed for DNC, where you never have to worry about those buffer overflows. Our buffers look at what the amount of data got transferred before it had to do an XOF, and readjust that buffer automatically for it.
Right, and you're utilizing the parameters of the machines, the DC codes and other codes necessary to understand.
Or hardware handshaking. And nowadays, a lot of machines will communicate with FTP, CAPS, different types of protocols that machines have, or USB, different ways that machines have.
Yeah, that makes a significant difference. And I think too, it's going to reduce setup time.
Yep.
Because if you're managing the revs, in principle, we used to say if the program was G for green, R for red, the proven program was a green program. So if you got that version, that basically you're ready to run as long as everything's set up right. Push the button, and if you don't have that kind of rev control, your setup time is going to suffer too, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've had customers tell me they have so many troubles trying to get programs in, it can take them, like an hour or two, which is just unheard of. But it's amazing to me how many times I've heard people say that. And with a good DNC system, you should have a program in seconds.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's good. That's question 2, I think, pretty well managed. So what are the typical challenges faced when implementing DNC system? Now, that's a pretty heavy topic.
Yeah. And that really, to me, has a lot to do with if it's a newer machine or an older machine. So older machines are typically going to have just serial ports. And most DNC systems can handle serial ports. When most DNC systems came out, they handled that. And it just, some handle it better than others. And, having a good method of communicating with the serial port is very important. But it's also, there's a lot of, companies that buy the latest, greatest machines, and it's going to have newer technology. And so they're going to have Ethernet ports, USB ports. So they're going to have different ways to communicate. And the ports are going to have different protocols. So you want to have a DNC system that can communicate using these different methods so that you're using the best, fastest method to get your programs in and out when you're communicating. The other thing you're going to have with that is wired or wireless. We offer both. And, one of the things that people always ask us with wireless is how reliable is it? And, it's a loaded question because we always have to say it's as reliable as your wireless network is. If you have a great wireless network, it's going to be great. If it's not, you're going to have problems. It's that trickle down theory that if you don't have a good wireless, and unfortunately, we've had some people that go, oh, our wireless is good. And when we implement it, we find out it really isn't good. And we can do a analysis and show them where the shortcomings are. One of the things we find is a lot of people will do auto channeling, and auto channeling is a feature that is designed for really congested networks. If you're in a building where there's a lot of places next to you, where you don't have clean channels, you use auto channeling. But what happens is when you're communicating, every time you change channel, your device will disconnect and reconnect. Well, you don't want that to happen when you're downloading a program. So auto channeling is not recommended ever to be on when you're doing a DNC. And you also don't want to have crosstalk. And you get crosstalk by using the same channels between access points. So Cisco has a great document that we give people all the time that shows how you have channel 1, 6, and 11 are the 3 clean channels, and how you should spread those out so that they're not overlapping. But don't want to get too technical, but there are techniques you can do to make sure your wireless is very robust.
And speaking on that, let's say in the past, I don't know, 3 years, what are most companies doing? Are they going wired? Are they going wireless? What are you suggesting, and what are you seeing?
We have more and more companies now going wireless. They don't want to have the expense of running the cables, and copper's not cheap now, so running cables is not cheap, and the cost of a manpower to come in and run those cables isn't cheap. So the cost of the wireless, when most people weigh it out, is usually no more expensive, or if not less expensive. And they like the convenience of being able to move the machines. They're still going to have to get power to it. We don't have wireless power yet, but Tesla tried, but it's not here.
Yeah, not yet.
But, so when they move the machines, they still got to hook up power to it. But, not having to have to hook up a communication line is a big plus. But we do run into companies where they're, have government rules or different things where they don't allow Wi-Fi in the shop, and then they still run cables to them. Here again, I always say you can't beat a cable. It's going to be very reliable, but people that have a good wireless system in place, you're not going to have issues with that either. But it's definitely the most convenient way to install a DNC system.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. Although, I've over the years kind of gone to the tendency of recommending wired, just for reliability, in the sense, not so much the system's reliability, because I know the hardware works great. But the reality is a lot of companies have IT departments that aren't even in the same building.
Yes.
They're literally in different countries in some cases. Yeah. And they'll go off and, hey, these IP addresses look available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need even with our hardware, when it's wired, our hardware all gets a IP address. And we've had it where the IT department will give us a bank of IP addresses and say, use these.
Yeah.
And then we'll hook everything up. And then 6 months later, they call us and say, hey, we're having problems. And we'll say, unplug that unit, and we'll ping it, and it responds, which means something else is using that IP. And then we'll have to say, okay, they've used it. And a lot of times you've had it where in the meantime, they've changed the IT department to use a different outsourcing company. And that company had no data showing what was already used. So they just go, oh, we'll pick these. So, I mean, it's things that have to be managed by IT well, but we do run into those things, and they, pop up, unfortunately, more than anybody would like. And it's not an issue with any one DNC company. All DNC companies nowadays are tied into the network. And if people don't manage IPs, you're going to have this issue with any company.
Absolutely. But I think certainly from experience, you can run a DNC system intranet. You can create your own network.
Sure.
How common is that? Is that becoming more of a...
We do have some companies that do that. We have a company in Pennsylvania we've been working with for about 15 years, and they had their own internal network that was Wi-Fi, that was isolated from the regular network, just because they do a lot of government work and they just didn't want to take any chances. But here again, they've been bought out now by a new, mother company that has decided we don't want to have 2 different networks. They put in new access points and said, no, we're bringing everything under one umbrella. And, so luckily that changeover for them went very well. They had a very good wireless network set up ahead of time, so things went smooth. But like I said, it all depends on how good that wireless network is.
Well, I think, when we look at the question, what are the typical challenges? And this, although it seems like a fairly simple question, there's a lot of veins that we can attack, especially with the experience we've got.
Mm-hmm.
And you touched on a lot of them. But I think maybe data security and training are two of the aspects I think that people underestimate.
When it comes to data security, one of the issues we run into today is some people will just buy a new machine, and a lot of new machines have the ability to just map a drive.
Yeah.
And so they just map these machines. I had a customer in Michigan. Well, they weren't a customer. They're a customer now. So previous to working with us, they had newer machines that all had the ability to map the machine to their network. And they were doing this for several years. Everything worked great until, unfortunately, somebody got a ransomware, which spread through the whole network. And then the day it went live, it ended up affecting, it was on every CNC machine. And every CNC machine stopped working along with all the computers in the office, and very costly, project for them, because of course the company held them ransom for a lot of money, and they weren't willing to pay it. So their IT department had backups, but they weren't the most recent, but they got their network up. But the problem was with the machines, they had to call the manufacturers for each type of machine they had. And they came in and they said some of the hard drives were so locked up, they had to put new hard drives in, reformat, redo everything. It cost them a lot of money. So we're not a big fan of people, mapping network drives. It seems convenient, but it's just not a safe method. So we always recommend having something where you have a protocol. Like if you have a machine that you're doing serial, you're initiating that from the machine, so nobody can push anything into the serial port without that. If you have newer methods with USB or Ethernet, USB is going to be the same type of thing. Like our USB device, it's a virtual thumb drive, so it mimics a thumb drive. So here again, when the operator goes to his USB, it's going to show him all his programs, but nobody can push anything to the machine. And you can lock it down to just the ports that are being used within our system. And same thing with Ethernet. If we're doing FTP or CAPS, different types of protocols machines have, we can lock those down. So it's all initiated at the machine. Nothing can be pushed out to the machine, and prevents these catastrophes. You could still have this happen on your internal network, but you don't want it to affect the machines, because ultimately the machines is what's keeping the company in business. Office employees are needed to, write the programs and manage and do everything they do. But if the machines aren't making chips, nobody's making money.
Absolutely. And that I'm glad you brought that up, because that is, I think, something people just assume that, nobody can get into the CNC control.
Yeah.
But that CNC control is really a PC nowadays.
Yeah. We also run into a lot of customers that, because they work with, government agencies or things where they have to make sure even the electronics that are being used are vetted. They want to make sure that there's nothing in there that could be spying on their systems. That's why here again, it's important, all of our hardware, we're from the US and we have US made hardware. Other countries, may want something from where they're at, but everybody has their own reasonings of what they want to verify their security.
Yeah, that is a good point. Knowing the chipset, where it's from, is very important, and we know that there is some concern about what hardware is being used, especially on wireless networks and networks in general. So, and how about the training? Should people schedule any training time? Is there some efforts needed there?
Yeah, I mean, with any DNC, once you install it, there's going to be some training. More of it's going to be for the person managing it in the back office. You always, we like to say we want the person in charge to understand everything. We want them to be there to learn the machines, and we want to train the supervisors. So if the operator has trouble, they have somebody to go to. We want those people to be as knowledgeable as possible. But the operators, it's good to have them there to learn. Most of what they're doing are going to be more straightforward. With our system, we include step-by-step documentation on how to do it.
Yep.
And depending on how you're communicating, there'll be different documents for each type of machines. A FANUC control is going to be different than an Okuma control. It's different from a Haas control. They all have different buttons you hit, and even different versions of those controls have different ways of doing it. So documenting that is always important.
Excellent. And underestimated sometimes. It is, everything's easy when you know.
Yep.
But I think it's important that at the planning stage that get in there.
Yep.
So question number 4. How does DNC improve efficiency and accuracy of CNC machining operations?
Well, we slightly touched on this before, where we talked about the sneaker net method, where having a good DNC system where you can call out a program in seconds compared to minutes or, even like I said, people say hours, that's very important. And then making sure you have the right program, where people are using multiple devices and multiple thumb drives and there's no control. You also risk that the customer last time loved the parts. This time they find out it's the wrong rev level or something because somebody used an older program because you weren't using a DNC system that controlled the files. So, that would be the biggest thing I could say on that question.
When you have a CAM system and the guys in whatever it is they're using in the office, and it's a new program, and they recognize that, hey, there's some changes that are needed. There's actually a new drawing rev or whatever. I thought, in this particular case, improving efficiency, if it's too painful to get the new program down to the shop floor, then they're going to try and edit it on the shop floor.
Yep.
The guys will get in and go in and start making changes, which aren't replicated in the CAM system.
Yep.
So if the DNC is efficient, and the guys say, okay, I need another rev, it's not a big deal. They send it back down, or they put it in the right place. Would you say that's a good point?
We have customers that say we don't upload anything back. If there's a change, we want the operators to tell us. We'll change it in the CAM system, and they re-download the program so that the CAM system always reflects what is the current version. And that's a very good method. I mean, some people prefer to just say the operator's going to make changes and we have that. But if there's a lot of changes, you're going to go back to that CAM system and you won't have all those changes. So doing those incremental changes at that time, I think is a very good method.
Yes, I agree. I 100% agree. And if the DNC system is easy and it works, then I think it just makes that efficiency that much better, because it's just like having a good post processor. If it's great, make the changes you want, post it, send it out.
Unfortunately, I'm sure you see this, is we still run into customers that say, I don't need a CAM system. I can do it just as fast on the control, which I would say is impossible, but people have that mindset and they think they can do that. And some people say, oh, my program takes 5 minutes to make. It never does. That's just a thought they have. I'm sorry, I'm a big believer in CAM, and a CAM system is always going to do the program faster, more efficiently, and you get to prove it out, on the CAM system. And most CAM systems, once you get, used to them and you trust your post, you can post and put in the machine. And, here again, I always say, if you have a new program, you could have touched off your tool wrong. Make sure you always single block each tool, make sure it starts. But I know a lot of people with CAM systems that just say, after I verified the tool cuts correctly, they just let it go because they really learn to trust their post. If you're writing that program manually, you're going to spend a lot more time proving that out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay. So really it's a chain of events, sequence that your CAM system is good, your post is good, your DNC is good. You can make changes and get more reliable results that way.
Yep.
All right. So question 5, what are the common pitfalls or mistakes companies make when setting up a DNC system?
Well, one would be not using the best method. Some people have a brand new machine that has an Ethernet port, but they've always used serial, and they'll just hook it up to serial again. And they'll say, this is just the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
I go with the theory of I want to do the best method for each machine. Ultimately, we'll hook it up however the customer recommends. If he wants to do serial and they have serial, we'll do it. But we would always recommend the best method for the machine. And same thing when it comes to wireless or wired, what is the best for their particular needs. If they already had cables at the machine, we can usually adapt to those cables. If they have wireless and we feel that it's a good wireless system, we can adapt to that.
Yeah, well, I think too, it's all about planning, right?
Yes.
Because I think in our experience with you, the planning stage was crucial.
Yeah.
Because we have a shop, filled up, whatever, it might be Siemens, it might be Heidenhain, it might be, of course, Fanuc Controls, Mitsubishi, Fagor, Miltronics. I mean, shops are filled with all kinds of machines,
Sure.
with all kinds of generations.
They buy the best machine for what they're doing, kind of work. I mean, if you're cutting aluminum, you're going to buy a different machine than if you're cutting Hastelloy. They're not necessarily need the same type of CNC machine.
Exactly. And generationally, they may have been having, big giant boring mills and other machines back from the 80s, which, might have, some old Cincinnatis with the big blue controls.
Sure.
And, replacing a machine like that today, if it's even possible, is pretty difficult.
Yep.
So when we look at this, what are the common pitfalls? In my mind, I really thought it was planning and understanding, because a lot of times too, you have multiple bays.
Yep.
Right. How
Which
do
will
you
affect wireless.
Yeah, how do you work with customers to help them plan before you can even quote? Do you do
The
that?
first thing we do is we actually have a sheet that we send them that will have them list all the machines, what kind of controllers on the machine, what type of communication ports do they have on that machine. And sometimes people will not even know. Like they'll say, I have a Fanuc 31i, but on our sheet it will say, do you have USB, Ethernet, serial? And they'll say serial. But we know a 31i has USB,
Yeah.
it has Ethernet. So it has different methods depending on what the customer best needs are. So once we know the machine type and the control, we've been doing it for so long, we can usually still come back and say, we know this machine has better options, and we'll come back with a plan. But starting with that sheet always helps. It helps us quote, and then that way we can give them a quote for whatever kind of hardware they want, wired or wireless, but to make sure we fit the best type of device on each machine.
Okay, and what do you do in the cases where they may have multiple bays, for instance?
Well,
There may be
if they're doing wired, we typically recommend them don't run the wires all the way back to the office. Most
Okay.
companies will have a IDF cabinet, which is just a big cabinet in the shop that has hubs usually in it. Those hubs can be connected through Ethernet or fiber optic cables back to the main network. If you're going wired, if you don't have those IDF cabinets throughout the shop, put those there. And that way you reduce the length that you're running the wire. Doesn't matter if it's Ethernet, serial, however you're communicating, keeping that wire shorter is going to make it easier. If you're doing wireless, here again, wireless does not go through brick walls or metal walls very well. So having a good wireless system where you have an access point in each bay, or even sometimes multiple access points in a bay that will cover that area, and then having a good wireless company that looks at your infrastructure, looks for hotspots, looks for the crosstalk between the units, and make sure the wireless is mapped out well is also very important.
One of the great things I thought and continue to think about ENET DNC is it can be a hybrid configuration.
Mm-hmm.
So, in one area of the shop, they may have terrible wireless.
Yep.
So you could go wired there, right?
Yep.
And you could go
Yep.
wireless over here, and
Yep.
and then you have different units to manage different generations of machines.
Yep. and everything can be done all with the one server interface or multiple server interfaces. So we have it where companies have multiple plants, and they'll control the plants all at one location, or they'll have multiple locations, but the software is very flexible that way.
Yeah, I think that's a real winner, because you may want to go wireless or wired, but in fact, in some instances, it might be just better to do some type of hybrid configuration.
Yep. I just had a customer that's been doing wireless for about the last 10 years with our system. It's been flawless, but they contacted us and said, can you quote us going wired? And I said, why? And they said, well, we picked up a new customer that's all government work. And they came through and they did a check of our shop, and they said, we don't allow you to have wireless in the shop. So because of that, now they're going wired. Not that they had issues, but like I said, sometimes when you have security measures that certain agencies have, wired sometimes is the only way they'll allow the system to be, tied into the network.
Yeah, that certainly can be true in an ITAR situation for sure.
Yep. Yeah, ITAR is definitely a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, question 6. How does DNC integration impact the overall workflow and production process in a CNC shop?
Well, the main thing it's going to do is make sure you're using the right program. Touched on this briefly before, but when you're using the DNC system, that's really the big issue, is to make sure you get a complete program, that you're not dropping characters, and that it's the right program.
Okay, so but when you look at the integration, what is the workflow? What are people looking for? So we had SneakerNet. How do you see that the integration on the shop floor? What's it like for those guys? Do they still run up to the office and talk to the programmer? How is that happening?
It's a really good question, because there's a lot of different methods I see. Some people will get a shop packet, and the shop packet will have the like a setup sheet to tell them what tools they need to put in and what program they need to use. We have other people that will have this more electronically. So they'll have either a tablet at the machine, or they'll have a computer at the machine, and their ERP system will tell them what program. We have it in eNet where you could have it linked to a hyperlink within your ERP system, that you could click on it and it could then communicate back to eNet through our web-based interface, queue up that program. So all they have to do is on the machine say input. So it prevents them from calling down the wrong program, which is important. Sometimes people just reverse 2 numbers and you can get a completely different program. I have one customer that they have their machine set up where they never change the tooling. They make a product line that each machine cell runs a group of parts, that they might run 50 different parts on those machines, but it's all within the same parameters where they use the same tools. And so when they call down the program, they basically hit cycle start and it just starts doing it. But if they transpose 2 numbers, it could still cause a crash on the machine, make wrong parts. So it is very important. And that's why they went to having it all electronic. They didn't want the operator typing in the program number. They wanted it to be picked. And that way it makes it automatic. Some customers we've done where we put scanners on the machines where they scan and it queues up the program and they input it in. And it can be done no matter if it's FTP, if it's USB, if it's serial. With serial, you're usually requesting a program. With FTP and USB, people will see a directory of all their programs, but some people don't want that. So you can use our web-based interface, the software interface, a wand, multiple ways to say, even though it's FTP, when I scan this, it's going to queue up that program, that when I go to FTP, only that program is there. And that way they're not picking the wrong program.
Yeah, that is right on the money. I think, on this particular question, that's what I was thinking of, because that truly is an integration that is overlooked by many.
Yeah, and with our system, with eNet, we have a complete API built in. So we have customers that rather than use either our web-based interface or our software interface, they actually just use our API, and they have their own software that they develop in-house, because they're using QC systems, ERP systems, all kinds of systems that they want to generate one interface for the operator to use. We have a customer down in Kentucky that has a great interface they wrote themselves. And one of the reasons they went with eNet was they liked that we had this API. So in their interface, when they go to, set up a new job, the operator's at the machine with a computer, and it shows them this is your next job. They've already queued that up for him. He can only do that next job. In that job, it shows him what tools he's going to use. It will then have the program that he's going to use. He just clicks on that program, it queues up the program. So if it's an FTP machine, when he goes looks at his program, it's the only one there. If it's serial, it's queued up and he says input. But having that API makes it very flexible for customers that have the ability to create their own custom software. But we also offer a suite of programs and web interfaces that can be tied in. So some people say, I don't want to have a computer at the floor. They'll just go with a tablet or even just a wand to make it, more efficient, to make sure that they're doing everything at the machine. But you can buy a tablet nowadays a lot more efficiently than what you're going to pay for a computer. And it, I think, is more expensive for the IT department to maintain a computer compared to a tablet.
Yeah.
And our web-based interface is all internal. So, with eNet, we're not having anything external, which is really big for ITAR and companies that are security conscious. We have a web server that's running just internally on their network. So when they go to our interface to say, I want to queue up a program or use any of the features on our web interface, it's, all internal. Nobody's accessing this externally unless they have a VPN where they want to.
Right,
the customer would have to control that.
No, that's brilliant. And that's great that API is available. And I can see more and more companies taking advantage of that, especially as they're trying to find ways, obviously employees.
We even have resellers. I'm talking to one of them that uses our API, for their own, internal products that they have to tie the two in together. And, that's another reason why it's very handy. You're able to give your customers more features that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a good tie-in. All right, let's get to question 7. What are some of the key factors to consider when choosing a DNC system for your CNC machine?
Well, I think it really depends on, what type of machines you have. There's a lot of different CNCs. If you have older machines, and they're just all going to be serial, you're probably going to have an easier time of finding a DNC system because most DNC systems are serial. If you have newer machines, you want to really do the best method. And, you want to make sure you find a DNC system that has all these different methods of communicating, and wired or wireless, depending on what you're doing. So a lot of these things overlap as we're talking about them. But for this question, I think it's the biggest factor is going to be what kind of machines, what kind of ports those machines have, and how you're connecting it to your network. Another thing is file structures. When you're looking at a DNC system, we have people that they've had files they stored for years, and we'll have it where a customer might have what they think is the best method. And I'll bring up one example. I've seen customers where they say, oh, we have a really good system. We have a folder on our server that's called CNC files. And in there, we have a folder for each customer. And under the customer, we have each part number. And under the part number, we then have their CAM files. And then there's another folder for the DNC files. And there's another one for setup sheets. And then when you go to the DNC folder within there, now we have, more folders within there. Well, that's great. It's very organized, but most DNC systems don't want that because they don't want to have to be searching all these different locations to find a file. They really want it more organized where they're all in a folder for one machine. But, depending on what you're doing, like eNet has multiple ways of doing things. If you're queuing it up at the machine, say it's FTP, the system would let you then see all those subdirectories, or if it's USB, you can pick those subdirectories and navigate down, and it works very well. But if you're doing serial, it can get really cumbersome. So then you really want to have an interface that you can easily go to, be it web-based or software-based, where you can navigate to that and do that. But if you're doing serial and you just have a more basic structure where each machine has its own download subdirectory, you could then use a call program at the machine and not have to worry about having, somebody have a computer or a tablet there.
That's again also a very interesting point that I think some people forget, because your file management is important, and being able to set the directory you're working with, or allow the DNC system to travel down through a series of directories. Might take a little longer to find it depending how deep it is,
Yep.
but it will queue it up. So that's good.
Yeah. In our system, we even have a feature where it can scan down automatically, but you have to be careful with that because some people may have the same number used for multiple parts in
Mhm.
different folders. So you have to be careful on when you're using that option.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'd have to have a completely unique file structure and naming
Mhm.
structure to allow that to happen.
Yep. I've seen customers that will have a program using a 4-digit number because they have a FANUC or a Mazak or a Haas, a machine that just had a 4 or 5-digit number. And so they've been using these numbers for years, but they have it where each machine uses those same numbers, or each customer will use those numbers again. And that's where you run into the
Yeah,
issue of if you're calling it out automatically, you want to make sure you're getting the right file.
absolutely. I think another thing, when you're looking at key factors, is to consider scalability.
Hmm. Yeah, because what you buy today, you may have more needs in the future. We had a lot of customers, and we had a customer that we had for years. And besides doing DNC, we do monitoring, and we also tie into ERP systems. And we had a customer that bought a different monitoring system, and I was there, and he had us hook up some machines, and he said, "Oh yeah, we're doing a monitoring install." I said, "Well, why didn't you come to us?"
Yeah.
He goes, "Oh, you do monitoring?" That's where, it was a flaw in our salespeople not letting them know these were options we had. At the time they were looking for DNC, and that's what they told them we had.
Sure.
But scalability, like you said, it's important to know what other options can that DNC system do for future. Because a lot of times tying them in, that if you have a wire at the machine or you have a wireless box at the machine, the more you can do with that without having multiple boxes or multiple cables can be a big plus for a shop.
And I think it tied in to your API ability, because
Mhm.
that scalability also allows you to work with third-party companies like CSI Flex with the MT
Yep.
Connect and FANUC Focus.
Yep.
It brings in a suite of tools that can be complementary to the
Yep.
growth of a company's infrastructure, right?
Yep. Because, we've had customers that had a bunch of machines that were all serial, but as they're replacing those machines, they are getting newer machines that have FANUC Focus or MT Connect, and FANUC Focus does allow you to drip feed the machine. Why their FTP doesn't. If you're using FTP, you have to have the data server, but
Yeah.
FANUC Focus gives you that extra capabilities. So depending on the features of the machine, having a DNC system that can take advantage of those would definitely be something to watch out for, because you might buy on what are your current needs, but 2 to 5 years from now, it could be completely different. And making sure you can scale to those is definitely important.
I think the other point on this topic, and I know I was so buried in here, but cost of ownership.
Mhm.
When people are using ERP systems and the other components they may have in their company, um, they sometimes disregard the cost of ownership of what's happening on the shop floor. I think that's one
Sure.
of the outstanding things for ENET, for sure.
Mhm. Yep, I would definitely agree.
So, all right, number 8. Can you share success stories, case studies where DNC implementation significantly, and I'm sure you have a lot of these, but
Yeah.
improve performances?
The biggest one is always with the companies that are using the sneaker net method. I've had customers that say we're using thumb drives and laptops, and they put eNet in, and they find their payback is 2 months. So it's really a no-brainer, and they'll come back to me and go, "Why didn't we do this years ago?" You know, because it pays for itself very quickly if you're using the sneaker net method. So I mean that's one of the things we find, but we also find customers that had DNC systems that unfortunately weren't the best DNC systems. Unfortunately, not everything in the world's created equal, and they'll have a system that, I've gone to people that say, oh yeah, a perfect example was a customer that I went to with you, Al, where they had a different system. And they said whenever they called all the program to the machine, this particular machine had a backplotting in it. You're probably remembering this customer. They would call on the program, and they said it would take typically 5 to 10 times before it would come in correct. They would download the program, run it through the backplotting, it would say error, and they do it again and again. And each time they called down the program, it took like 2 minutes. So we said, okay, let's put in ENET. We hooked it up to this one machine, and we said, call it now. The program came out in about 30 seconds, and he went, oh, there's something wrong. I said, why did you say that? Well, it took 2 minutes for the other program to come down.
Exactly.
He said, well, run it through the backplotter. And he was like, oh, it's perfect. So he deleted it, did it again, 30 seconds, ran it through the backplotter. Perfect. Did it again and again. He was like blown away.
Yeah.
But how much does that save the customer if they're not doing that program 10 times, running it through the backplotter? And even then, it might still pass the backplotter, but maybe there's still something wrong. Making sure it's a reliable DNC system that is doing it as quick as possible, and also, making sure that the code is correct. So we have so many success stories that way. Like I said, being the sneaker net method or just not a reliable DNC system. And it's amazing how many times I've gone into people's shops and they'll tell me, oh yeah, we just always, I went to a place in Connecticut that they said, oh, whenever we need a program, we have a wireless system. What we do is we reboot the box, we wait, and then we try it. If it doesn't work, we reboot the box again, do it again. If it doesn't work by the third time, we go in the office, we reset the computer. I was like, you got to be kidding me. This is a nightmare. You do this all the time? They're like, yeah, that's just what we used to. So we put in ENET. And this was an interesting one because it was a trial where we did 5 machines and another company did 5 machines. And they ran our system. And after about a month period, they came back and said, oh, yeah, every time we need a program with your system, it comes out. It's very reliable. It works every single time. The other system, we gave them 5 machines. They couldn't do 2 of the 5 machines. And the 3 they did are not as reliable as yours. So that's where, and I'm not saying there's not other reliable DNC systems, but making sure the one you buy has the features you need and the reliability is really important. One of the things that's always worked well for us is customer references. We had a customer that we went to, and they're a large corporation, and they started out when they were looking for a DNC system, they started with 1 person, then became 5 people, then 15 people, and the committee was 20 people to pick the final system. And when they said they wanted to, they narrowed it down to 3. We were one of the 3. And they said each company had to give them 50 references and had to take them to 5 different shops. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 3 different shops.
Right.
And I said, well, I'm not going to even go to a customer and say, I want to take 20 people to your shop. I said, can you bring the committee down to, like 5 people? And they said no. So I found one of my customers that said, oh yeah, you've always been good to us. Bring 20 people. We don't care. And we brought them in and we gave them all the references. And when we went in, he said, well, we're going to go with you. And I said, oh, that's great. Could I ask, how it went? And he said, well, our only concern was how much did you pay these customers that we called to say such good things about you? So I always love that story because it was just funny. I'd never even thought about that. But he said one of the other 2 companies wouldn't even give them references. And the other one only gave them a handful of references, and they all said bad things. He said, so it was just really bizarre that all your customers said such good things. So that was great to hear.
That is great to hear. I think one of the other things in this question that I had noted down was you build purpose-designed equipment.
Mm-hmm.
You're not buying standard off-the-shelf networking things and solutions that you might use inside of an office. You design hardware that's designed to be in a nasty environment in the shop.
Yep. We originally did. Most of our competitors, unfortunately, buy what you're describing, that standard off-the-shelf device, and they make that sound like it's a plus, that we don't have proprietary hardware. Well, all hardware is proprietary to that vendor. There's going to be a driver or whatever you have for that hardware. So I always hate that when people try to say it's proprietary. If you buy a Cisco hub, you have to get updates from Cisco. You're not going to get them from D-Link or anybody else.
Exactly.
The technology it's still serial, it's still Ethernet, it's still, but it's proprietary. But the difference is our hardware is built for the manufacturing floor, for the issues we had. Because when we used to use that other stuff, the problem we would have is anytime there's a problem, if it was a software issue, we would have fixed it already.
Right.
But it's always a hardware issue. And then to go to the customer, and if they bought that hardware from you, they expect you to fix it. And when you go back and say, well, it's a hardware issue, they're like, so fix it. I bought the hardware from you. Well, but it's not something we can fix. And after being frustrated with that, we decided to be also the manufacturer of the hardware and design our own hardware. So, we find it makes all the difference when it comes to our system as far as reliability. And, most systems are using just some off-the-shelf device. And that's why, like I mentioned before, we have this USB device that is a virtual thumb drive. I could be wrong. I don't know of any other company that has this device, but it's great because a lot of machines have thumb drives. And it gives you a great way to be able to not have to walk around with thumb drives, but be able to utilize that thumb drive on the machine and have an easy way of get your programs in and out with the same features of serial and Ethernet and everything else. So this way, if you're sending a program back, it's still going to have those rules where it goes to that upload subdirectory. It's going to email somebody if they set it up to say this machine at this date and time uploaded this file, and it can do the file compare automatically and say these are the changes that happen. So it can take care of all this in the background, and still let them only download what's considered a proven program. And but you're not having that sneaker net method or somebody having a thumb drive in the toolbox.
No, and because you're designing the hardware from the ground up to be working in this environment, working with the protocols that you've set, data management and how they all work together it just works seamlessly, just like you've said, whether you decided it was a USB unit or a W unit or wired or wireless unit.
And the great thing is, if there's an issue, like one of the things we used to have was if a device locked up, somebody had to go out there and reset it. With our hardware, we have it where if it loses connection, it reboots itself automatically and reconnects. Say somebody was working on an access point, or there was something with the network they were working on, and the unit loses connection. You don't have to then go reset it. Our system will say, I'm not connecting, something went wrong, reboot, reconnect, do it all transparently so it's seamless to the operator.
Love that. Okay, so that's those are the points I thought that would be good there. So I think we're on question 9, and we're kind of sort of running out of time, aren't we?
Sure. Got a few minutes left, but I'll go faster on these last couple.
Steffi's not giving me the stink eye.
That's good.
Not yet, anyway. So how does DNC contribute to a better data management and traceability on a CNC operations? We kind of covered this a little bit, but fire away.
Like you said, it's kind of where, a lot of these topics overlap. This is one of them. The biggest thing here is making sure you have the right program, that you can only pull out this program and it's the right rev level, and that it comes out to the machine without losing any data.
I think the key points, I know when we're talking to customers on this, centralized data storage, right? You've got audit trails.
Yeah.
So anybody comes in and says, what version, what rev, as we spoke about earlier, and, in enhancing, obviously, reporting.
Yeah.
And knowing what's
and logging. So like you said, reporting, every time an operator pulls on a program with eNet, it's going to log all that. So you can go at any time and say the programmer wants to see what they downloaded on second shift or third shift. They can go out there and look at the log and see every program that was downloaded the night before. Or even if there's a question a week later where they find some parts that were wrong, and they go back and they say, okay, what program were they using? They can go back. There's a complete log of everything that was uploaded or downloaded, what time it was, so that they can have some type of traceability to find out what happened.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was saying about the audit trail, because that'll happen. You'll have a series of parts that were supposed to be, I mean, they by eye they may look exactly the same, but there's a hole in a different spot, or there's
Sure.
and having that audit trail can say, yeah, we got it. It's right
Yeah.
here. And yeah, that of course
You
that
know, and
yeah.
I've seen this scenario once where a customer called out the latest program. They ran the part, took it to QC, and they said there's a hole missing. Then, what do you mean there's a hole missing? Well, whoever did the program last time didn't back it up. They didn't send it up. So there was no updated program. That's where it's very important. So I have some customers that say, every time you get done with a job, before you do a new job, you upload it, even if it's the same program. We'll take a look. If it's the same thing, we'll manage it on our side. But you don't want to take that chance. And sometimes you might have multiple people making changes. Second shift might have their own idea what's the best program. Third shift might have their own
Yes,
idea.
exactly.
This way, it gets uploaded multiple times. ENET will keep multiple revs, and then the programmer or the engineer can look at these multiple revs and decide which really is the one they should back up. So next time they're pulling out the proven program.
Excellent. So question 10, what future advancements or trends do you foresee in the DNC technology for CNC applications?
Well, I think
That's
the
that
big thing
crystal
is,
ball I need you to use right now.
yeah, the big thing I think is making sure you adapt to all technology. So right now, like ENET will connect to every type of way a machine can connect, but we don't know what the future holds, obviously. But having a system that can adapt to it, the fact that we create our own hardware and software, we can always make sure whatever comes out, you can get the latest version of ENET, and you're going to be able to adapt to that machine, but also adapt to latest technologies, ERP systems, to be able to tie things in, using an API to tie into those systems, having a web-based interface, having the ability to do monitoring. If you're monitoring on a machine, a lot of times if you're using one system to do both, you're not having multiple wires or multiple wireless units. You're also able to tie those things in, where when the system says, I'm calling this program, it can look that up and say, oh, okay, this is the cycle time for that part. And as you're analyzing it, they can get all that information. So having a system that can do monitoring and tying to ERP systems to be more flexible for the future. A lot of times people, when they look for a DNC system, they're focused on that one issue.
Right.
But having the ability to tie into different systems, in the future, are very important. And we've even had customers that we go in to talk about DNC, and one of the things we do when we demo DNC is we actually have the actual software with a virtual simulator on the screen. And no matter if we're demoing DNC monitoring, we can show how everything works on a you could be in another state, country.
Sure.
We can remotely show you how everything works. And I've had a lot of customers come back and go, this is the first presentation I had that made sense to me. Everybody else had a PowerPoint presentation,
Yeah.
and it's just a bunch of screens, and I had no idea what they're talking about. But this is my machine, and I can see how that interacts and how it works. So I think that's very important, so that we can have all these things tied together.
That was always very impressive. Being able to relay a cryptic topic and bring it, especially when you're trying to relay it to individuals who may not be touching those machines on a daily basis.
Sure.
So, in the future, obviously we keep hearing about AI and how that could tie into not only the DNC, but as you said, mainly into the monitoring side of things, where it'll start doing some analysis.
Like, talking about AI, I know CAM Solutions has a product that you guys developed in-house that uses AI, and it was a really creative idea. I would love a customer to come and find a way that we could tie into AI. We just have to find a good creative method before we would implement it, but we're always open. I always say we could have our programmers create things all day long, but our best ideas come from the customer because they're real world ideas. And what works for somebody is going to work well for somebody else. We've had some companies that made their own homegrown DNC system or monitoring system, but it's one person's ideas. When you buy a system that is a global system where they're working with thousands of companies, you have so many ideas that come from so many different places. And, if you have an employee that's creating a system for you, when they leave, who's going to maintain it? So having a partner that you're working with that has a system that's going to be more flexible for the future, always being grown, adapts to anything, and has ideas that those people never even thought of. That's very important.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, it's been great, and I know we could go a lot longer.
Sure.
I want to do a little shout out to Cato in Norway. Thank you. He wrote, "Never thought DNC could be such an interesting topic."
I'm glad to hear that.
So, yeah, we appreciate that, Cato, and certainly I've always found it interesting, but that's the world we live in.
Sure.
So I hope our audience has found this great, and you've been a fantastic guest. I really appreciate it, Steve.
Well, thank you very much.
Really
Always great talking with you.
Yeah, get down and dirty. And, I always remember you saying this.
You're like me. You've had a lot of experience in this industry. So it's good to put our heads together a lot of times.
It is. And, like I was just saying, you've always said the system is bulletproof. And my experience tells me it really is. It's, if you get an eNet DNC system, it's not something you really have to worry about. The biggest thing you'll worry about is your own network. The reliability of what's happening on the shop floor is really solid.
That's great. Yeah, we find the same. I'm glad to hear it from somebody else.
Absolutely. And, working well together with CSI Flex, I think teamwork is, as you say, partners in this business.
Yep. And being able to have systems tie together, that's important. If you have all these systems and nothing talks to each other, you're just not very efficient. Having all these systems talk to each other is very important.
Absolutely. All right, Steve. Well, have a great night. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yep. Thank you very much.
We'll get Stephanie back on here, and I'm sure we'll have you back on again soon for maybe a deeper discussion on monitoring.
Sounds great. That'd be awesome.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good one.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey there, Steph.
Hello. That was a great show.
We're back to the pastures.
Exactly. Got the cheese.
Oh, I love it. Do you really have some cheese?
No.
I love cheese. Anyway, Steph, that was a great having Steve on. I think it was, again, one of those conversations that you could be on for hours, really.
A wealth of knowledge. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Steph, maybe you can tell me about the next week's show.
Absolutely. So it's called Revolutionizing Workflows, the Impact of Industry 4.0 with Louise Schvack and Mark. So
nice. It's kind of an unusual show where there are going to be two guests.
Yeah, that will be a new for us.
That'll be, our screens will need to get bigger. So that'll be a great show. Looking forward to that. And it's kind of complementary to what we covered today. This is all part of Industry 4.0. In fact, the term seems to be getting old. It should be 5.0 soon. I'm not sure when that'll happen, but for now, that'll do the trick. Well, Steph, thank you again. I guess I'll let you sign us off.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, you know what, Stephanie? I think maybe I didn't tell you this. The next episode will be on Tuesday, the 23rd.
Yes, that's good to. I did ask today. I noticed it Tuesday, so that's good to clarify with everyone still watching.
Yeah. So don't look for us on Wednesday, or you will find us, but it won't be live. So Tuesday, the 23rd of July.
Perfect. Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you.
Good night, guys. Good night, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Cutting Time CNC Podcast, where precision meets progress. We hope you've gained valuable insights into CNC manufacturing and are inspired to optimize your processes for efficiency and innovation. For more resources and to connect with Al or Stephanie, visit us at cuttingtimecncpodcast.com. The link is in the show description. Remember, the journey doesn't end here. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible in CNC manufacturing. Make sure you follow the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite player to get notified about new episodes of the Cutting Time CNC Industry Podcast.
Hey, Steph, yeah, let's get Steve back